Imagine you're at a zoo. You walk past lions, then giraffes, then elephants, animals from Africa, from Asia, from all over the world, and then you see it, a kangaroo. And suddenly a strange thought hits you. Why is this animal always connected to one place? Not sometimes, not mostly, always. Kangaroos only exist in the wild in Australia. You never see native kangaroos in Europe, or Africa, or the Americas, and that feels odd, because animals move. Species spread, land connects. So why didn't kangaroos? Why did this one animal family stay locked to a single continent? It sounds like coincidence, but it isn't. This is one of the most well-documented, scientifically proven stories in evolution. And once you understand it, Australia itself starts to make a lot more sense. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden reasons behind everyday facts, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Because today, we're answering a deceptively simple question. Why do kangaroos only exist in Australia? To understand this, we have to go back millions of years. Far before humans. Far before cities. Before Australia was even Australia. At one point, Earth looked very different. The continents weren't where they are today. They were part of massive supercontinents that slowly drifted apart. Australia was once connected to Antarctica, and Antarctica was connected to South America. Animals could move freely across these lands. But then something crucial happened. The continents separated. Australia broke away and began drifting north, isolated by vast oceans. And isolation changes everything. When a landmass becomes cut off, evolution stops being global. It becomes local. While mammals on other continents evolved in competition with each other, Australia evolved alone. And this is where marsupials come in. Marsupials are mammals that give birth to extremely underdeveloped young, which then continue growing in a pouch. Today, marsupials exist in a few places, but Australia is where they truly took over. Why? Because placental mammals never made it there. On other continents, placental mammals, animals like wolves, horses, cats, and primates, became dominant. They evolved faster in certain ways. They competed aggressively. In Australia, that competition never arrived. Marsupials were left alone to fill every ecological role: predators, herbivores, burrowers, tree climbers. And among them, kangaroos found their niche. Australia's climate became dry. Open grasslands spread, hopping turned out to be an incredibly efficient way to move across vast distances with little water. A kangaroo's strange movement isn't a flaw. It's a perfect adaptation. Hopping uses elastic energy stored in tendons, allowing kangaroos to travel long distances while conserving energy. In hot, dry environments, that matters. Over time, kangaroos specialized further and further. They didn't need to compete with deer, or antelope, or horses, because none of those animals were there. This is the key idea most people miss. Kangaroos didn't choose Australia. Australia shaped kangaroos. But this still leaves an important question. If kangaroos evolved so successfully, why didn't they ever leave? Why didn't they spread to other continents later? That's where geography delivers the final answer. Australia is surrounded by ocean, and for large land mammals, oceans are walls. Kangaroos can't swim across thousands of kilometers. They can't survive long sea journeys on floating vegetation. And by the time humans arrived, the evolutionary story was already written. By then, the rest of the world was dominated by placental mammals that would outcompete kangaroos almost everywhere else. So kangaroos stayed, not because they're limited, but because evolution locked them into the one place where they were perfectly optimized. And that leads to an even bigger realization. This isn't just about kangaroos. It's about how isolation creates uniqueness. And that's where the story really comes together. Australia didn't just create kangaroos. It protected them. Once Australia became isolated, it turned into an evolutionary island, and islands behave differently. On islands, whatever arrives first gets a massive advantage, and whatever arrives late usually loses. Marsupials arrived early. Placental mammals arrived. Almost not at all. This is where most people get confused. They assume kangaroos survived because they're stronger or better. But evolution isn't about being better. It's about being unopposed. On other continents, placental mammals reproduced faster, developed inside the womb longer, and adapted quickly to competition. They pushed marsupials out of most environments. In Australia, that invasion never happened, so marsupials diversified instead. There were giant kangaroos, tree-dwelling kangaroos, short-faced kangaroos, even carnivorous marsupials larger than wolves. Kangaroos weren't a single animal. They were a whole strategy. And hopping, as strange as it looks, turned out to be one of the most energy-efficient ways to travel long distances on dry land. At low speeds, it looks awkward. At high speeds, it's incredibly efficient. A kangaroo uses less energy hopping faster than walking slower. That matters in a land where water is scarce and distances are huge. So while deer evolved in Europe and antelope evolved in Africa, kangaroos evolved in Australia. Same problem, different solution. Now here's the part that makes it scientifically airtight. We know kangaroos evolved in Australia not just from fossils, but from genetics. Their DNA shows long, uninterrupted isolation. There's no evidence of migration in or out for millions of years. No land bridges, no hidden pathways. When Australia briefly connected to nearby regions through shallow seas, it was already too late. By then, kangaroos were specialized, and the rest of the world was already crowded. Even when humans arrived in Australia, they didn't spread kangaroos elsewhere in the wild. Because outside Australia, kangaroos would struggle to compete. Different predators, different diseases, different ecosystems. Evolution doesn't care how iconic an animal is. It only cares whether it fits. And kangaroos fit Australia perfectly. That's why, even today, when animals are transported all over the world, kangaroos remain uniquely Australian in the wild. They're not rare because they're fragile. They're rare because their success is local. This is the deeper lesson behind the question. Geography doesn't just shape maps. It shapes life. Isolation doesn't just separate land. It creates uniqueness. And once evolution takes a path deep enough, it becomes almost impossible to reverse. So when you see a kangaroo, you're not just seeing an animal. You're seeing millions of years of isolation made visible, a continent drifting away, a world evolving on its own, all locked into one place on Earth. And that's why kangaroos only exist in Australia. If this made you see the animal and the continent differently, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves nature. Because sometimes the simplest questions reveal the deepest scientific truths.